Hi, everybody, and welcome to the 18th episode of Socratic Satsang. Our topic today is the philosophy of existence. This is a huge topic. It's one that philosophers have grappled with for centuries. And it's also interesting how the West has looked at it and how the East has looked at it. Lots to get into. So, without wasting any more time, I'm going to our first speaker, Kirstyn Nair.
Okay, when we came up with this topic, I had a bit of a hard time because it is such a big question and I wasn't even sure where to start. We can say that we exist, and science can explain the mechanisms of existence. It can explain the processes of biology, the unfolding of the cosmos, the law of physics that hold everything together. But what it can't explain is the why we are here, why the laws of physics exist at all, why there is a world, a universe, instead of nothing. And since I was having a hard time wrapping my head around the why, I went in the opposite direction of kind of the non existence in the physical realm. We exist for a time and then we no longer exist. Many species have existed and then ceased to exist. Um, and other species oftentimes seem much more in tune with nature while we are often destructive of it. So that also left me wondering, what allows us to exist in this world? Why are we here? They're massive questions. So in thinking of non-existence, I started thinking about death because death can give us glimpses into life. Hospice nurses often say that contemplating death provides us with purpose for living, and they see it up close. Um, when people are dying, what is it that they care about the most? And rarely is it hours worked or money earned, but the simple things, appreciating the health of the body, having moments of, just warm sun on the skin, meaningful connections, and just those precious moments with loved ones. So, meaning and existence seem to be very tied together. Um, and then I was thinking of the other mystery of existence beyond the physical body, the question of the soul. Uh, I felt deeply connected to those who have passed, at times even closer when then they were alive, almost as if guided. And sometimes I wonder, is that real or just wishful thinking? Maybe it's simply love continuing in another form. Um, but then there's that question again of, why does love exist? Why is it in the end the most important thing? So, all that to say, as exploring this topic, it just felt like a lot of questions. Um, and maybe that's a big part of what existence is, not this puzzle to solve, but a mystery to embrace.
Thank you, Kirsten. I can go next. Western philosophy and Eastern philosophy have two different outlooks on this, and it's interesting to get into, though I won't dive too deep. Western philosophy has looked at the philosophy of existence from a couple of fascinating angles. One is that the universe itself seems to exist with no purpose. It's more playful and meaningless than purposeful, but we have to give ourselves purpose. So that's an interesting concept. The other concept is of freedom and responsibility, the balance between the two. And then there is the concept of life and death. So it's almost like dots and dashes or linear. Eastern philosophy, mainly Indian philosophy, looks at it more in a circular pattern. I remember many years back, I was sitting with an Indian scholar, and we were talking about life and beyond. And he asked me this question. He said, if you're drowning and I come and save your shirt, will it help? And I said, no, it won't. Of course not. So he said, that's exactly how the philosophy of life works. This life is just a shirt you're wearing. you are the person wearing the shirt who goes beyond each lifetimes. So if we have to save you or liberate you or give you moksha, then it's not just the shirt or this life that has to be saved. It's much, much deeper. And the things he spoke about were the way to attain liberation was self knowledge. That's something called Jnana Yoga. Then he spoke about duty and understanding the workings of karma. Karma, in very simple words, can be taken as just the law of consequence. There are consequences to every thought, word, and action. So think about it, think about the consequences, and then choose accordingly. Don't limit your thoughts to just this life. And then there is the concept of devotion, bhakti yoga, wherein you devote yourself to a god or to a person or to a family or to a cause, and that devotion has to be complete and absolute and pure. And that's another way to move beyond lives. Thank you. Denise, you're next.
Sure. Thanks, Vin. Oh, so much information to talk about. So, when I did a little research on this, I kind of went to two of my favorite philosophers. One is Aristotle, the other one is Marcus Aurelius. And so, you know, uh, one of the central questions that seems to be there for many philosophers in the past is whether, our existence carries purpose. And I think both yourself and Kirsten have already identified that. I know Aristotle argued that everything in nature has telos, or an end goal. And for human beings, existence is not just about living from day to day, but moving towards some form of fulfillment. What he called eudaimonia, to make sure I say that right. So it's basically a state of flourishing where our potential is fully realized. So existence in that sense is more directional. It has meaning that kind of unfolds through growth and action and the pursuit of knowledge and virtue. On the other side, Marcus Aurelius, who it was I found a very stoic, was a very stoic writer, had very stoic perspective, approached existence as part of a larger cosmic order. So he believed that the universe itself is structured by reason, or logos in ancient Greek, or I guess possibly Roman, um, and that human beings exist as participants in a greater design. So, versus just an individual purpose. So, from his view, the question is not simply why we exist, but how we live in accordance with nature and reason. And that touches on some of the things that you had mentioned, Vin. So, existence is therefore about alignment, or accepting change and recognizing the impermanence of life and acting with justice and integrity. So, together, these perspectives suggest that it's not just random or meaningless, our existence, but both of them point towards as existence as it's more layered. So, it involves the development of the self, but also a connection to something larger than just us as an individual. And to me, this opens up the question of whether existence might even operate across different planes or dimensions. And naturally, I have to bring metaphysics into the equation. So that's what makes me think of this, whether it's physical, mental, spiritual, what role those layers play in shaping our purpose and meaning. And I wonder about this all the time, whether we might in fact be living on more than one plane at once. Having been to Egypt, I've seen what they believe, or what the ancient Egyptians believed when it came to life and death. And I mean, all it takes is one visit to the Valley of the Kings, and you can definitely see how they viewed life after death and how the spirit moves on. And I find that absolutely fascinating. So anyway, those are some of my thoughts.
Thank you, Denise. Who'd like to go next? Tulip, over to you.
So once I heard Osho saying that this existence is hilarious, and I found that hilarious. I just found it funny. Like, what does he mean by that? And he, according to me, he's never wrong. And then I gave it a thought, and I think that we are just probably a product of chemical reactions or whatever is going on, and we give meaning to our lives because we are, like, as human beings, we are probably the only species that um have the unique capacity of being self-aware, right? So because of that, uh, we tend to be conscious of how we behave, and then we create a set of values, um, because obviously we can't be like animals who don't understand what's going on. So I think we got to give meaning to our lives, but you know, looking at the larger picture, I'm not sure if there is any purpose.
Thank you, Tulip. Who'd like to go next? Kevin, over to you, brother.
I was reminded when I first heard about the topic, and I did my own research on some of the religious teachings I've had in my past, and what I came across was the road of enlightenment and my path, my journey through life. And it's an honor for me to cross path with you guys. And in looking at that, if I can provide some inspiration or a different way of looking at things or to provide comfort, uh, that's great. But I can also receive that too. So as we're all journeying on our way to nirvana, it's interesting that I was reminded of and Tulip had sort of put this in my head about a show a movie I watched in the late 1990s called The Truman Show, where the main character, his life was a soundstage, and everybody knew what that was put in his path, or it was, his family, his father, mother, were all actors, going to work, living his life. And I'm just wondering if some superior being here is watching, hey, let's put Kevin in this situation today, and let's see how he reacts to that. And I like to think my existence is more than just a soundstage. I think that you guys are real and not actors, unless you want to be. Uh, but it's my honor to cross path with you guys. And I'm in this discussion. I'm learning a lot, and I'm hoping I'm providing some sort of a different way of thinking for this topic. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Kevin. It's an honor knowing you, and it's a privilege having you as a friend also. Over to you, Drake.
Looking at this question of existence, I was sort of looking at it a couple of ways. First, what is our existence? Does it start when we're born and end when we die? Does it start when we're conceived? Where does it start? And that got me to thinking, um, there's two ways of looking at it. One is from the time we're born, we know that we exist, or at least once we're old enough to form those thoughts, that we can tell that we actually physically exist. However, we can't tell before or after that during our life unless you look at it on a different scale. Um, every atom in our body has existed long before people were here. They all originate, they come from different stars. That's where all the different atoms are formed initially, all the different compounds, the elements. And um, so we're as old as the universe itself and what we're made up of. But those atoms have been in countless other and elements, been in countless other beings, rocks, trees, whatever, planets. Um, so in a way, we've always existed and always will, as long as there is a universe and time. Um, but that's different than um, our consciousness existing. And I think that's more what people think about in general when we're talking about existence is their consciousness. And I think I look at it on a more of an existential viewpoint where um, we're not predetermined. We have the free will to choose what we want and to know that we exist and there's no big master plan, that we are here because of everything that's happened before us. But it doesn't necessarily control us or what we're doing. Um, but yet we still exist in the state we're in right now, and in some form, will always exist.
Thank you, Drake. Over to you, Tulip.
So I'm not sure what the way you mentioned about consciousness, Drake, but what my understanding of consciousness is that it's it's the same. I mean, it's the subtlemost form of matter, like that's consciousness. So yeah.
Thank you. Drake?
When I'm talking about consciousness, it's um, our ability to think and be aware. Um, how that develops or how that exists, I don't know. I don't think there's ever been anything a definitive answer as to what it is. Um, but I'm not talking about a physical element, more of a mental element in that case.
Thank you. Yes, Tulip?
Because my understanding is that it's because of the life force. Of course, no one's seen it, but it's a constant movement of awareness that's called pran. And that's why we even do breath work, just to increase our pranic quotient, because it's pran that makes us aware that we feel things and we experience things because of that. And that apparently, according to the ancient scriptures, is supposed to be the subtlemost form of matter. Like it's just one thing, but it's that it's a life force that makes us feel it. And then it's like matter, and it there's a cycle, like what Vin mentioned initially. It's like a cycle. It's from solid state um to the non physical.
I'd like to put in my 2 pennies here. And that's that there's a thin line, blurry thin line between being alive and being conscious. Being alive is even a person who is on life support or and about to be unplugged can be considered alive. It's more or less a mechanical function. Whereas being conscious means your ability to discern and be able to understand differences. So for a long time, we thought that plants were alive, but they didn't have consciousness. And then there were a few experiments conducted, and we found that plants respond to music, they respond to kind words, they respond to more than just sunlight and water, and that they have consciousness too. So that's my understanding of consciousness.
Wow.
Yes, Denise.
Yeah, just in that vein as well, there's been a lot of studies on the consciousness of water or the reaction of water to certain environments. Dr. Masaru Emoto, he's passed since now, but he did a lot of work on understanding how the elements in our universe, as Drake mentioned, we're all quite ancient beings if you look at our atoms and starting to look at the elements on the earth. And he, as I said, did a lot of research when it came to water and the ability to inflict, like you could say, thank you to a jug of water. repeatedly, or you could say bad things to another jug of water. And when they froze the water crystals and looked at the crystalline structure of the water, the ones that were being praised and say thank and that you're grateful and thank you to or thankful to, those were beautifully made crystals. The crystals were harmonious and beautiful to look at, whereas the other one was all metallic and very distorted. And so those that much like you were saying, Vin, about plants, it's the same thing with other elements on this planet. And if you think about our human body, that is made up of more than 70% water, then and the different patterns that our body has relative to what we see in nature. That consciousness is I think in more than what we know. And I know scientists and researchers are still doing a lot of work in being able to prove that, right? Who knew that you could talk to plants and they would there's even research that actually shows that they recognize your energy. So when you go and water your garden in a time like right now in Vancouver, it's very in the outer area, it's very warm, very humid. Plants are needing that water and that moisture, and apparently the research that's being done shows that they can recognize the energy of the person or the entity that is providing life to them through water. So, anyway, very, very interesting subject indeed. I'll throw a different viewpoint here too with regard to it was interesting when Kevin talked about the Truman Show. That was absolutely fascinating. I hope to equate that to, like, Sim City, right? If you're played video games a long time ago, Sim City was a brand new game where you create your own city and everything. So I'm hoping too that we're not in some kind of strange, simulated environment. But it got me thinking a little bit when we talk about different constructs in this world, thinking about time and how time, being kind of a man-made, um, is man-made in our current environment or our current structure of time. But I know the ancients used the planets, they used the sun, they used the moon to help build build models for seasonal change and that cycle. But it does kind of connect back to that larger discussion of existence. But so not only just asking why we're here, but also whether we're experiencing just one linear path or kind of as I mentioned earlier, are we participating in multiple layers of time simultaneously? As in, is there a multi universe? Is there other dimensions that we can participate in, other than just what we're experiencing in the now?
I'd like to add to what you just said, Denise, about water. I've done some reading on that and completely agree with you. It's also strange, in fact, not maybe not a coincidence that most supernatural, that spirit and ghost sightings have happened near water. And also, they found that memories are stored in the brain where the water is maximum. So I completely agree with you on this. And yeah, things that we don't think of conscious today may be proven to have consciousness tomorrow. Science is just beginning to find its feet and take off, and it's doing a brilliant job, if you ask me. If I can go a little bit into the philosophy of existence, so ancient Hinduism, that's known as Sanatana Dharma, believed that we are these multidimensional beings that are here on earth just for an experience, and we go through many, many lifetimes. And essentially, what we need to do is celebrate life, celebrate not just by partying all the time, but celebrate it through excellence. And that was a concept which was followed for several centuries till around, I think this was about 500 BC or so, when society started falling into classes. And the poor became disenfranchised from this concept because they were hungry, they had a lot of work to do, they were being exploited, and then they couldn't connect to this concept of excellence or celebration. What's there to celebrate when you're poor and when you're being worked and when you're being sidelined from society? And that's about the time that Buddhism came into existence. And Kevin, please correct me if I'm wrong. I know that you have a foot in Buddhism. So the Buddha came, just got all this traction, and Buddhism became so popular because Hinduism didn't recognize suffering and didn't recognize too much of that part at that time. And when Buddha came in and he spoke of suffering being a part of life, being part of existence, and he spoke about desire being the root cause of suffering, that just struck a chord, and Buddhism just exploded and became extremely popular. So much so that it began to take over a large part of India, till we had this Hindu sage named Shankaracharya, who came into the scene and reinvented and revitalized Hinduism to include rituals and to bring back concepts of duty and karma, and bring people back to their roots. And that's how the two found their balance, from my understanding. Yes, Tulip.
I think it's also Adi Shankaracharya who promoted or who spoke about the Advaita Vedanta. That's the non-dualism, right?
Right, right. But it was there long before.
Yeah. So yeah.
They're right from the Shiv Purans, from what I understand. Yes, Denise.
There was something, and I think it was Tulip that mentioned just about being in physical existence, and then, someone passing on, and then moving into more of the spiritual side of things. And I think I've talked about it on our podcast before, where I've had lots of experiences where I felt the presence or spirit. Even like when my uncle passed away, he used to come over on Sundays, and I'd make him breakfast. And he was new to his iPad, so I became the tech teacher, if you will. And we were very close. He was my favorite uncle. I grew up here in Vancouver, and he was in Vancouver, as far as I can remember. And so we were very close. And when he passed on, he was very young. He was only 60. And unfortunately, I ended up with cancer. And but, there's certain anniversaries and times where I can actually smell his cologne in my home. So now to put it into perspective, I'm very intuitive. So, when it comes to energy, I feel my grandma's presence with me in the kitchen. She taught me how to cook. She taught me how to do, and my grandfather was very tenacious. He built his own business. He was a hard worker, and so what I do sometimes is I end up drawing some of my strength from those other past relatives or people that were in my life that are no longer here, because I believe that their energetic existence is still there. They may have passed on to a different world or into a different being, but that feeling, that energy is, to me, is still present in the ether, or part of those elements. So I find that quite fascinating when we talk about the paranormal, and I do think that life is going on beyond just the physical realm, for sure. So anyway, and I have no proof or backup at the very moment to be able to say yes for sure, but I certainly have had a lot of personal experience and know a lot of people who have had personal experience in what I've just described. So I find that quite interesting.
Thank you, Denise. I can again agree with you 100% and vouch for what you're saying. What I'm going to say is highly debatable and probably even funny to an extent, but it's my personal experience. So, my father's mother, that's my grandmother, passed away when I was young. And I've probably met her 4 or 5 times, maybe less than that, maybe 2 or 3 times in my life. I have very vague memories of her, though I do remember her. I remember her voice. I remember her saying things to me. So I have a strong memory of her. And then from the time I became about 19, 20 years old, I started feeling her presence in my life. And now I'm 56, going to be 57. And I can't tell you the number of times I've experienced her being present, uh, giving me advice, giving me counsel, being present with me throughout my life. And people who've been close to me in my life have also experienced her. And there have been some situations or instances which are just too strange to, too much to be coincidence, where they've said things to me that they learned from her, which there's no way anyone else could have known, right? So for me, her existence has always been the solid reality, whether anyone believed it or not, just in matter. For me, she's been real. And then at the age of 52, I got diagnosed with Asperger's, autism. And initially, it was a shock. I was trying to wrap my head around it, and I started reading up, listening to podcasts, just educating myself every which way I could about autism. And one of the funny things I learned was that people with Asperger's very commonly are known to have imaginary friends or partners or people in their lives. And I read that in more than one place, and I went, ooh, so maybe this is just my imagination. I've just imagined my grandmother all along throughout my life. And then I read somewhere else that most autistics, and that includes you, Denise, though I know you're not autistic, but you have a an autistic daughter, and usually autism gets passed down through the mother. So and knowing you as well as I do, there are some little tinges here and there of strange, awkward, funny behavior, which puts you, I'd say, in my clam. And so I've read that people with autism can be strangely intuitive and know things and have some kind of frequency match or connect, which allows them this huge instinct and gives them access to information before it happens, or just allows them to read situations which are not natural. So you can swing this either way. You can say that my grandmother is a figment of my imagination, and because most people with Asperger's have these imaginary people in their lives, or you can say that I have tapped in some way, somewhere to my grandmother. And that brings up another huge question is, if we believe that there's nothing after death, then how can she be around? And if we believe in reincarnation, like Hindus and Indians do, then maybe she's incarnated and gone a long, long time ago. So who am I talking to? Okay. And I've pondered this for a while. And what's occurred to me is that, let's say we do have a soul or a spirit or some element of consciousness, which leaves the body when we die. So at the moment of death, let's say that a person's dying, and there's a moment where their life energy leaves them and they're dead. If you break that down to not just 1 second, but you break it down to microseconds and go frame by frame, there would be some micro or nanosecond where the person has just passed and the life energy is just about to leave and dissipate. Whether it goes into reincarnation or whether it ends there, there is that one moment where they just, where the life energy is still that person and the person's just dead. At that point of time, when that life energy is still that person, it is possible that our physical limitations don't apply to that person, whether it's time, space, gravity, any of these. So at that nanosecond, that person could exist across time and be across space. And if that person can exist across time, even if they do reincarnate, or even if they just end there, that microsecond or that nanosecond is enough to allow them to exist permanently as long as they want, wherever they want. It sounds funny, but it just makes sense to me. Thank you. Over to you, Tulip.
And 100%, I just love the way you've put this across. It's true. And so when you're saying that they can exist eternally, right? In other words,
Yes.
and then some people like yourself or Denise or the people Asperger's or some people who are connected can tap into whatever they have, like even if they've been even if they're born again, but it's not like the whole piece goes into someone, right? There it's a part of that. So that little nanosecond, so you can tap into that, and then you can have, whether it's conversations or you can experience what the person has experienced. So it's like everything exists simultaneously, right?
Thank you. Yes, Denise.
Yeah, and I will agree with your evaluation of me. I'm one of those people. This I'm speaking to Vin now. I'm one of those people that can walk by a painting that is 20 feet away and see that it's slightly off center just by a little, like by a fraction of an inch, right? So anyway, but just to reiterate a little bit of that. My lots of studies have been done when someone is about to pass, and the weight of the body and then the weight of the body after they've passed, and they found that the weight is actually less after they've passed. So that's I find that, and it's very minimal, but I find that quite interesting. And then the thing that happened to me that was just kind of hit some of this home for me, where I tried to make sure that I wasn't just imagining these things, but a real thing that happened is I woke up in the middle of one night. My aunt was very sick. We didn't know how sick she was, though, so we had no idea that she was on death's doorstep. And I woke up and I wear an Apple Watch every night. I track my sleep, I track all that stuff. So I woke up and it was exactly 12 minutes past 12 o'clock, just past midnight. And I woke up and I said goodbye to my aunt. It was like a moment where I was able to communicate with her, thank her for being a great aunt for my life, and just have a moment of communication. Found out the next day that she passed away at 12. It was 12:11. So is when they and so or no, sorry, my apologies. It was a minute after I had talked to her. So it was 12:13. My apologies. And that really struck me. If anything was going to help me be pulled out of a thought process around, and this is all in my imagination, it was definitely that particular time that I found quite interesting that I was able to. So I do believe that there is an opportunity, but that spirit, that element of ether, that whatever you want to call it, that the consciousness of that person as who they were, I do believe will exist. It for those who are able to tap into that. So.
Thank you, Denise. Yes, Kirsten.
Just a very short story to follow that. Remember my first year as a nurse working on a med-surg floor, and it was this interesting combination of addictions in general and then in hospice care. And I did some hospice work, and I remember having really connected with one man who was nearing death. I mean, he's getting ready to pass, and I had been caring for him. And I remember being out in the nurse's station. I was talking to my charge nurse, and I actually remember feeling this spirit like pass through me. It was almost like a tap on the shoulder and off, and I knew immediately that he was gone. And it's the first time I had experienced anything like that. And I remember thinking I had to get out of the conversation with my charge nurse because this had just happened. And I walked in and yeah, and then they just saw him lying there very peacefully. And yeah, so I thought I would just share that.
Wow. Thank you. Yes, Drake.
Just on the matter that we've been talking about here with existence and whether something moves on after the person dies and that, I think like anything else, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. And if this is true, it would be extremely extraordinary to know that there is something that moves on after. But I don't know that there's any good scientific peer-reviewed studies on any of these that show a lot of these things. A lot of the things people say are their personal experiences, which you can't really prove one way or another. It's hard to know what goes into it. People's cultural and religious upbringings affect whether or not they're going to see a spirit or feel a passing of some sort. Um, so really, I don't think even things like the body weight, the studies I've seen on that say there's either no difference or the minor difference there is easily explained by loss of bodily fluids, which occurs quite frequently when somebody dies. They void their bowels and that. And um, so a lot of these things, we hope that they exist because nobody wants to cease to exist. So we look for these things. But I think um, that any proof we have is merely circumstantial and wishful. And until we get to the point where we have a way of accurately measuring it, which we may never do if it doesn't really exist, it's hard to prove a negative or to disprove. Um, until we get to that point, we may never really know, and which means we just sort of go on what our gut is and what we believe. Um, but as far as our existence, I think um, once we're gone, and we don't exist except in that atomic and molecular elemental phase that I was talking about before.
Thank you, Drake. I'll just hand over to Kevin, but before that, I'd like to respond to what you said. I agree with you. I've also read that the 21 grams theory has been shot down quite a few times. But there's also been a time when we believed strongly that the Earth is flat. There's also been a time when we believed that there's no such thing as chakras or energy centers in the body, and now that's slowly being proven otherwise. And I've come across a few people, like you said, this is about your point about cultures. I've come across a few people who are from different cultures who wouldn't possibly believe in something that's not provable till they experience it. And once they've experienced it, then you just get gobsmacked and you, oh, okay, this can happen. And I agree with you about science. I love science. And I also know that it has a long, long way to go. And we're just getting our act together on several areas. Back to you, Drake.
Just the point on science there. Um, you did say the example you gave with the Earth being flat, and then later on it was proved to be round. That's kind of my point, is that there is no proof for these other things. We're just making the statements that we believe it because we feel this way, or we honestly believe that we've had a personal experience that we can't otherwise explain and think it's that way. But there's no actual proof. We've been able to prove the Earth is round because of many different ways, including going to space and you can see the shape of it. But you like say that I just don't see the proof there, and like everyone else, I think it would be nice if we could have something beyond. But until there's something a little more definitive, I'm still going to be on the other side of that.
Yep. Point taken. Thank you. Can I hand over to Kevin and then come to you, Denise, or is yours a response?
Oh, it's just a very quick response.
For sure.
Uh,
That's good.
Very quickly. My apologies, Kevin. Um, so I understand what you're saying, Drake. Absolutely. What I think, though, is that so science will look at X amount of experiences, but like I haven't shared. This is probably one of the first times outside of my family and some of my close friends that I've shared about my aunt, like what I experienced with that. So it's interesting to me if enough people could share that. Most people don't. Then will that change things? Like will that then turn into, okay, well now we have X amount of people that have experienced this. Could that make a difference? But if it's not known and it's just random experiences or that aren't known as a collective, then it will never really move forward, by way of I don't know if that makes sense or not, versus, like, traditional research and being able to say, "We can prove this or prove that through the research we've done," but has that research actually reached all of the people who have had experiences like that, like what Kristen was describing or yourself, Finn, or myself. So, and we're just three or four people here having these experiences, right? Imagine if you were to take everyone in the world who's had these experiences, culturally or not, what that might look like from a scientific research perspective. So, anyway, some thoughts.
Thank you. I think Drake has something to respond.
Just briefly, I see that sort of in the same vein as eyewitness testimony, which has been proven to be very unreliable. People can see the same thing and come up with very different um, beliefs, honest beliefs of what they saw, yet it's not necessarily what actually happened. And it's based on their experiences, what they're paying attention to at the time. And it could be the same thing with these other experiences that you honestly believe that and feel that, but it probably has more to do with your state of mind at the time and other outside influences than anything else, and isn't necessarily actually what happened. It's what you experienced, what you honestly believe, but it doesn't mean that it's what actually happened. Um, anyway, but I understand everybody's got a different point of view on it, and I'm not trying to convince you one way or the other. That's just how I feel.
Thank you, Drake. Over to you, Kevin.
Well, thank you. I was pondering another TV show, Star Trek: The Next Generation. There's a character, an android, very lifelike, and there was he was told to report to for sort of a disassembly. A scientist wanted to examine him and try and recreate him, and he didn't have faith in this officer and said, "No, I do not want to report." And then there was a trial to see if uh, he had the right to choose, or is he property. And one of the key points was, is this guy self-aware? And he described, okay, I'm in a courtroom, we're deciding whether I have a right to choose or if I'm property. And his defense lawyer, the ship's captain, said, well, he seems self-aware to me, and can you prove or disprove otherwise? And of course the judge said, well, that's the essence of this argument, does this machine have a soul? And how can I prove that he does or doesn't? And the similar situation, I'm fairly certain I have a soul. I'm pretty certain that the people on the screen in front of me have a soul. But can I prove it? I don't know how to. And that's another philosophy salon. But I like to think that if I don't see you again, through whatever circumstances, your essence will go on somewhere. So I'm hopeful for that. I can't prove that it will or won't. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Just jumping back into the ping pong that we've had going, adding to what Denise said, if we take 6 of us here, that's 3 with experiences we've already spoken about. The other 3 may have had experiences that they haven't spoken about. That's a 50% average already. I have this friend of mine, Doug, in Vancouver, who also has Asperger's, and he has this strange ability to be able to sense people's emotions and feel them exactly what they're going through across continents, and it drives him nuts. He had bagged this huge consulting deal on another country. I just can't remember the country. And he couldn't go through with it because he was experiencing the emotions of the person who was going through something of their own on the other end of the line. And it just kept affecting him and throwing him off balance. It's absolutely freaky, but 100% what he experienced. And again, like we said, these things can swing in either direction. You can take one side or the other. Yeah, thank you. I guess yes, Tulip.
It's interesting that your friend has this. I think it's a superpower. It's just that unfortunately, or I don't know what his circumstances are, but um he's not given that role, because I think we all have some, unique ability, and hopefully in the future there'll be more of roles or jobs or whatever, a space for people like that to tap into something and to make the world probably a better place in terms of accommodating these kind of gifts, if I may say so.
Thank you. Yes, Denise.
I think there's, just to your point, Tulip, I think a lot of ancient civilizations actually were able to tap into so much more than what we're experiencing as human beings in today's world. And there's so much proof of that, both with ancient Egypt, with the Maya, so many different unexplainable things that that really, I don't know, that and I guess the question then becomes, like, what do we need to prove? Like, what do we, like, if someone has an experience, does there need, like, did your friend Doug then need to prove that that's what, so anything that is affecting the mass population in a negative way, that can be quite harmful. But if someone's having an individual experience that's based on what they've experienced, then is proof really necessary or not? I understand fully what Drake was saying about perspective, right? I mean, it's like the parent who says, there's overwhelming evidence, empirical evidence that their son is a serial killer, but they don't. They can have all the evidence in front of their face and still say, no, of course he's not, right? So I think it's all based on, I agree, people's perception, people's experiences, the culture overlay, a number of different things that would drive the. But then again, like I said, the question becomes, where and when and under what circumstances do you really need to prove any of it? If you feel it in your heart, if you feel something that is a positive affect on you, and of course, in your friend Doug's case, it wasn't so positive, but then really, does it matter, right?
Thank you, Denise. Who'd like to go next? Okay, I guess we've reached the end of our discussion. This has been fascinating. I think we've dived into some um, deep areas and unexpected areas. It's been fun. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to our next one and what we are going to dive into there. So, see you soon. See you next time. Thank you.